Hello and welcome to a new Leela game. This is game 141 from the Premier Division, the reverse game of the Queen's Indian defense game that we saw in the previous video. Now, before we go into the game, let's see the final standings of the Premier Division, because yes, the Premier Division ended in the meantime, and as you may know, Leela didn't manage to qualify to the final. Stockfish and ElzChess finished in the first two places. They both managed to win 14 times, which is absolutely crazy. And even though they lost a couple of games, they managed to win a lot more than Leela, and that helped them to get into the final. Now, I don't want to complain. They are both, of course, deservedly in the final, and that final will be very, very interesting. But I just would like to make a point here. If we look at this table, it looks like, yes, Stockfish and ElzChess are the two best engines and they should be in the final. However, if we are looking at the cross table between the first three finishers, then we can see that Leela in third actually has a +1 score against Stockfish and an equal score against ElzChess. So if you want an answer to the question which two engines are the best, then this cross table is actually telling a different story than the final standings of this round robin Premier Division. And the truth is that the Premier Division actually became a contest of who managed to beat the bottom half better or more times, and clearly Stockfish and ElzChess did a better job there, but I'm not sure that they are the best two engines at this point, if we take into the consideration also the cross table results. So what my point here is that maybe this round robin system is not the best suited for determining the two finalists. I think that a double elimination cup system would be a much better choice for this. Now, a normal cup system is not perfect either, because there a lot depends on the initial pairings. For example, there could be an engine which, let's say, would make it to the final against Stockfish, but it's very unlucky and gets to play against Stockfish in the first round, and then he loses, and then he's out of the tournament, whereas in a round robin it would make it to the second place. Well, a double elimination cup system would solve this problem, because there you're out only after you've lost two different matches against two different opponents. So even if you lose to Stockfish in the first round, you have the chance to win all your remaining matches in the lower bracket and then get a final against Stockfish again and finish second, let's say. So I think that would be a better system. But as I mentioned, I don't want to complain. Stockfish and ElzChess will give us a very, very entertaining final, in my opinion. Alright, now let's get to the game. So this is the reverse game of game 113, so the moves are of course the same. And if you would like to know more about the ideas behind these moves, then please check out that video. There should be a link in the upper right of the screen. So now here, after castles, and d6, we have rook d1, just as in the other game, and knight d7. And there Leela played queen c2 with the idea to play knight c3 and e4, but Scorpio stopped that idea by harassing the queen with bishop e4 and so on. In this one we have queen d3 with the similar idea of knight c3 and e4, but here actually Leela played queen e7, allowing knight c3, and in this position stopping e4 with pieces is not really possible, but Leela had a different thing in mind. She played here now d5, stopping e4. The only downside to this move is that this bishop on b7 is slightly unhappy now, because he can't see the white king. But d5 is very solid, and now the game continued with c takes on d5, e takes on d5, and now rook c1, attacking down this open c file. So we have c6, which defends not only the c6 pawn, but also the d5 pawn and the b5 square, not allowing this knight to jump there. Now we have e3 and rook e8, And here Leela has now ideas of playing knight e4, centralizing the knight, and the knight can't even be taken at this point because after d takes on e4, the queen and the knight would be forked. Here Scorpio played queen b1, but not necessarily to get out of that fork. She wants to play here b4, clamp down on the c5 square and make c6 eternally weak. So Leela stopped that idea here with a5, and now we have queen c2, h6, knight d2, and now rook b8. And they are both trying to get in their breaks. Scorpio wants e4 and Leela wants c5. e4 would be great for Scorpio because if he could take on d5, then after c takes on d5, Leela would have a very weak isolated pawn on d5 that could be very well targeted by white pieces. In the same time, Leela would like to get in c5 and somehow unblock this d pawn, and then try to get in either d4 or c4 and get rid of her weaknesses. But none of these breaks really work right now. For example, if e4 is played by Scorpio, then Leela has d takes, and after knight takes, and knight takes, she could play here c5. And after pawn takes, she could take the knight and then take on c5 with the knight, and this is just a completely equal position. None of them have weaknesses, so this is not exactly what Scorpio has in mind. Instead of taking here with the knight, he could also take with the bishop, but this is not better either because after knight f6 and bishop back, c5 works again. If d takes on c5, then after bishop takes, king takes, there's queen takes on c5, again with a completely equal position. And after knight f6, bishop back, and c5, if we have bishop takes, rook takes, and then d5, well, this is not much better either because after rook d7, black can put a lot of pressure on this pawn, not allowing white to get activity. So e4 doesn't quite work yet. We have a3, and neither does c5. c5 at this point would allow knight b3 with pressure, and if now you take on d4, then after knight takes you have your isolated weak pawn on d5, something that Leela wants to avoid. And if c4, then after knight d2, b3 is a very strong idea, attacking this structure. For example, after rook c8, b3, Leela wouldn't have a choice. b5 is not possible because b5 is guarded by the knight, so she would be forced to take here, but after queen takes we can see that again the pressure mounts on d5 and also on b6, and this would be very good for white. So c5 is a bit premature yet, so they both are trying to prepare their breaks. We now have knight f8, and this would be very good after e4, because after d takes, knight e6, attacking d4 would be very, very strong. Again, e4 doesn't work. So we have knight a4 attacking this pawn on b6, and the knight returns to d7 to defend, rook e1, and now after bishop a8, Leela made actually progress, because now by removing the bishop, this rook can now defend b6, and also this allows an expansion with b5. So that after knight c3, Leela could actually play here c5. And now this idea with knight b3 doesn't work anymore, because after c4 and knight back, b3 is not so strong, since b5 now defends this pawn. b3 would even be losing actually here for white because of b4. And after pawn takes and knight back to e2, c3 would be a winning position now for black with this protected passed pawn on c3. So knight b3 here doesn't work, so Scorpio just ignored the position, the pawn on c5, and played h3. And now we have rook c8, queen f5, but g6 pushes the queen back, king g7, and now knight b5 and knight f8. Again, the idea is knight e6 and maybe knight g5. We have knight f3, threatening to get here with the knight. So the knight, after bishop c6 and knight back, we have knight d7 again, defending this e5 square, queen c2, and now knight e4. Taking the knight is not good for white, because after d takes on e4 and knight back, black can defend this pawn on e4 with f5, and black is fine. So instead of knight takes on e4, we have h4, and now the other knight goes to f6, knight e5, finally the knight lands on this very nice square on e5, bishop b7, queen b3 with pressure on d5 and b6, but now Leela played bishop a6 using a little tactic. Knight takes on d5 now wouldn't be so great, because Leela could play queen e6, pinning this knight to this undefended queen, and this would allow her to get a lot of counterplay after queen a2, trying to get in knight c3 when the knight defends the queen. Well, Leela could play cd, ed, and then rook takes on c1, rook takes on c1, and then rook d8 with pressure on the d4 pawn. After bishop takes, knight takes, and knight back to c3 to defend the queen could take on a2, and after knight takes, rook takes on d4, and Leela would be at least equal in this position. So knight takes on d5 doesn't quite work yet. We have first a4, and then h5, and now queen a2, and now knight d5 would work, because when the knight jumps back it would defend the queen. But now Leela decided to exchange this knight on c3. We have b takes on c3, and white still gained something, because now he can put a lot of pressure on this pawn on b6. We have queen c7, rook a1, rook e8, queen c2, rook d8, queen b2, and now c4. Leela finally decided to close down the queen side, but b6 became an eternal weakness in black's camp. Rook b1 attacking it, but Leela now has rook d6, a very nice defensive move, lateral defense, which is the best sort of defense for a weakness. It's much better than rook b8, when white could get all kind of tricks of taking on a5 at some point, or in some cases, it's not the case here, but in some cases white can advance a pawn and make use of the fact that this pawn is pinned to the rooks defending from behind. So actually defending laterally is a much better choice, because now this pawn is not pinned, it could take. The game now continued with queen c2, bishop c8. This bishop is now relocating to f5, where it doesn't allow white to mount a big pressure on b6 with all three heavy pieces, since b1 would be taken away. We have rook b5, bishop f5, queen c1, queen d8, queen e1, knight g4, trying to exchange this very powerful knight on e4. The knight takes, pawn takes, and now after queen e2, queen d7, queen b2, queen e6, we have again very nice lateral defense against that pressure, and rook b1 here is not possible because of the bishop, and there's no way for Scorpio to increase the pressure on b6. And in the meantime, these heavy pieces making lateral defense for this pawn could also do something maybe on the king side. We have queen a3, rook d8, queen c1, and now bishop d3. And in this position they both agree that black is actually better, even though this is a constant weakness. The game continued with rook a2, and now we have rook h8. And it becomes clear why is actually Leela better here. Well, she's threatening to play g5 and open the h-file, when a move like bishop e4 attacking this defensive bishop on g2 would be a very, very deadly threat. Leela could get a rook h1 mate in some cases. So Scorpio, not wanting to see g5 here, actually sank the pawn with e4. But after bishop takes, he pinned that bishop with rook e2. But now Leela has f5, and this bishop is very, very strong. It can't be driven away, because then this pawn takes and this bishop survives here on e4. And black's position here is very, very good. We have now queen f4. Scorpio tries to somehow get into black's position with that queen on the dark squares, but Leela just defends calmly. Here after rook f7 we have queen e5 check. Leela just defends with the rook. Taking out the queen would allow counterplay for Scorpio after pawn takes and rook e6. Scorpio could take out the bishop, and after rook takes on e5 also take on d5, and we can see how white suddenly gets counterplay after rook e7 and rook b1. The pawn can take the bishop, but now after rook d4 there are a lot of targets for the white rooks and the position is equal. So taking the queen is not great, but rook f6, just passively defending at this point and taking away squares from the queen, works just fine. We have queen f4, king f8, bishop f1, queen f7, bishop g2 and king e7, and Leela still has ideas to improve her position. She's now transferring the king to c7 to defend this weakness on b6, and in the same time she's removing the king from the hot zone on the king side. We have rook e3, queen e6, rook e2, king d7, queen e5, queen f7. There's a little back and forth here with the queens, but none of them want to actually exchange the queens on e5 or on e6. And here now, after some more moves, we have finally bishop takes on g2 and then occupying the open e file with a rook. Rook b1, king c8, rook b2, queen d8, queen h6, and now this queen is trying to get into black's position via the h file, but Leela defends very well, not allowing the queen any kind of tricks. Here queen e7, and now we have queen h8, and here Scorpio is threatening to take this pawn, and if the pawn takes, give a check with the queen on b8 and then come down with the other rook and mate the black king. But Leela of course sees these tricks and just defends nicely with queen e8. We have now queen g7 check, queen d7, queen h6, rook e4, queen h8, rook back, queen h6, rook e4. And seeing that it's very difficult to make progress with the queens on, Leela finally manages to exchange the queens here in this position by playing g5 and temporarily giving up this pawn. The queen doesn't have a choice, is attacked, it has to take on g5, but this now allows the queen exchange, and now Leela takes back the pawn. The other rook invades into black's camp, but there's nothing to attack there. We now have rook h7 and rook g6, and in this position actually they both agree that black is winning. Scorpio evaluates this at -1.5, Leela evaluates it at -2.2, but it's very hard to see at first sight why is black winning here, since black has these weaknesses on b6 and d5 and they are attacked by this rook, and the other rook is also quite active. Why is black's position winning here? Well, pause the video if you would like to think about it. Well, actually, it is true that black has these two weaknesses on b6 and d5, which is attacked by the rook. But this king on c6 does a very good job in defending those weaknesses. And in the same time, white also has weaknesses on a4 and c3. And, you know, only having these weaknesses is not such a big problem, but white's big problem here is that these rooks will eventually find their way into white's position on one of these open files and will manage to get behind these pawns and win them. And there's nothing Scorpio can do here. He tried here rook a7 with some tricks. For example, if Leela would play something passive like this, then rook a6 would be a good move, pinning this pawn and threatening rook takes on a5, and if king b7, then now the pawn is pinned because of this rook, and now this would allow the other rook to take on a5, and if king c7, then just check, and Leela wouldn't make progress. However, here in this position of the rook a7, Leela played rook e6 already, threatening to invade and get behind those pawns. So we have king f1 taking away these squares from the rook, but now the rook goes to h6, trying his luck from h1, so the king goes back to defend there. And now we have rook h3, And it becomes clear at this point that Leela found another way of getting to the white pawns by playing f4 and then getting to the c3 pawn this way. And Scorpio doesn't have a defense here. If he plays rook f7 to deny f4, then rook h6 threatening mate in 1 is very, very strong. The king has to run, and after this check and king e2, there comes the check on e6, and after king d2, rook a1 would be a very, very strong threat of rook a2 check, forcing the king back, and then playing rook h6 and mating on h1. And otherwise, black just picks up all these pawns. So for example, rook takes on f5 would be a terrible blunder here because of this check. The king would be forced back. Now rook h6, threatening mate on h1, and the only defense is rook e5. But now after this check and rook back, Scorpio would lose the rook, and with that also the game. So rook f7 doesn't work. Scorpio tried rook e7, but now came f4, pawn takes, and rook takes on c3. And from here on, all these pawns are very, very weak. And Leela will now just proceed on winning down d4 and a4 and unblock her pawns, and that would be winning for her. The game now continued with rook e3, trying to get a queen exchange, a rook exchange, but now came rook c1 check, king g2, and now rook d1. And this pawn cannot be defended. We have king g3, rook takes, f5, rook d1, king f4, now rook d2 attacking here, the king has to go back, but now rook a2, and the rook will pick up the pawn on a4, king takes on g4, rook takes on a4, rook b1, now this rook was attacked, d4, rook f3, and Leela is just much faster with her pawns. She can even give up a rook for the f6 pawn and just herd in her pawns. We now have this check, king c4, rook e1, rook d7, pinning this pawn, planning to take it next move. And now after rook takes, we have rook b1, attacking this rook on e1 and also threatening to get a queen. We have rook c7 check, but after king d3, Scorpio doesn't have a choice. He can't take here because then Leela queens on the b file. Scorpio played rook e8, but now comes Leela promoting the pawn. And after this is now very easy. She just needs to give up the rook for this pawn, and she can get even 3 queens if she wants it. We have now b4, rook b8, king c3, rook c8 check, king b3, king e6, d3, f6, rook f1, king e7, d2, and here rook c3, just desperation, there's nothing to do. And the game was adjudicated as a win very shortly here in Leela's favor after a4. A very nice win with black, where even though she had static weakness on b6, she managed to defend that pawn laterally and in the same time create some threats on the king side. A strategical masterpiece by Leela. Now, in the end of the video, I would like to thank to Todor Velichkov and Radu Daniel for their $5 contribution. Thank you very much. And of course, I would also like to thank to Adolf and Guilherme for their contribution, and everyone else who is supporting my channel one way to the other. Thank you very much. Please subscribe, like and share, and check out some of the other games. Thanks for watching, and see you soon. Bye bye.